The border between India's northeastern state of Assam and the independent Kingdom of Bhutan runs right through it. Nearly 2,000 square kilometers of the protected area lie in India, over 600 in Bhutan. It's called MANAS Tiger Reserve. MANAS contains 21 endangered species. It has rivers, grasslands and forests. In 1985, IUCN gave MANAS international status as a World Heritage Site. It received vital national support from the Indian government under Project Tiger in 1973. The monsoon dictates the many and varied moods of MANAS. From June until September, around 100 inches of rain fall. The Manas River floods to fertilize the grasslands with silt. In opening up new channels, the river erodes banks and topples trees, acting as a natural check on woodlands that might otherwise spread and take over too much grassland. At last, the river falls, leaving a network of channels 6 to 7 kilometers wide. The Manas River, the first of the reserve's 3 key habitats, changes within weeks of the monsoon ending from turbulent to tranquil. In a newly formed channel, a little egret tries to catch marcia fry, rounded up by 2 mergansers. A rarely glimpsed smooth Indian otter hunts along a newly deposited bank of silt. Manas is one of the last places where it's possible to find truly wild Asiatic buffalo. Elsewhere, they've interbred with domestic water buffalo. They're heavily dependent on the riverside grasslands and use the rocky islands in midstream as resting places, especially at night. There's no cover there, so they feel safe from tigers. They graze on the algae that grows along the banks in the dry season and wallow in the heat of the day to cool off. Manas is visited by a fluctuating population of up to 2,000 elephants, as many as you can find in the whole of Sri Lanka. The Asian elephant, almost everywhere else, is in considerable danger. There probably aren't more than 12 to 15,000 left, all told. Spread of human population is invariably the cause. At Manas, this isn't a problem. The herds cross freely between the Indian and Bhutan sides of the reserve in search for food and as the seasons dictate, just as they have always done. The cutting of such traditional migration routes is one of the main causes of elephant decline elsewhere. Because the ranger force at Manas has poaching very much under control, it's one of the few places where you can still find a big tusker carrying huge ivory. The herd moves away from the river into the second of Manas's 3 main habitats, the alluvial grasslands. Once the dry season comes, some part of this grassland is always hidden under a pall of smoke. The management plan for the reserve calls for burning in a patchwork pattern, a section at a time. Setting fire to old grass is standard practice for encouraging new grass to come through. In the old days, all the grassland was set alight in one glorious blaze. The new policy, begun by the reserve's director in 1976, produces a cooler burn and allows some of the old grass to remain as cover for animals while new shoots begin to break through. These black drongos are taking advantage of the system to catch insects disturbed by the fire. The chief benefactors, however, are not the birds, but rare grassland animals who can feed on tender new grass while being able to hide from their enemies among the still-standing stalks of the old. The effectiveness of the system can be seen here. This area has already been burned. The swamp deer are almost completely hidden by the surviving stems, yet they're able to find new grass at ground level. The Bengal florican has benefited greatly from the burning program. It used to be a common bird in India, but destruction of grassland everywhere has made it increasingly rare. The florican is a species of bustard. The males boast a most remarkable courtship display. That's a hog deer, the commonest of MANAS's 4 deer species, remaining completely unmoved by the performance. A successful male chases a rival away. You hardly ever see the hen bird. She does nothing except watch from thick cover where she's perfectly camouflaged. The display usually starts in April, 2 months before the arrival of the monsoon. Later, the savanna where the florican nests will be under floodwater. When rival males wander into a dominant male's territory, there's invariably a sparring match. When his 2 rivals have been persuaded to leave, the resident male puts on an impressive aerial display to settle the affair. That's a migrant, a bluethroat. They passed through Manas before the monsoon arrived. The real triumph of the new burning policy is the appearance, or rather reappearance in fair numbers, of this little creature, the pygmy hog. It's a wild boar in miniature. Adults only stand 10 inches high at the shoulders. The hogs are usually hidden by grass many times that height. The pygmy hog occurs mainly in Assam. It was first recorded in a tea garden there in 1847. Until quite recently, it was feared to be extinct. Due to good management, Manas now has probably the largest population of this extremely rare little creature. Manas has a population of about 100 Indian one-horned rhinos, and the reserve is capable of holding more of this increasingly endangered species. It's poached for its horn everywhere. In Manas, intense patrolling by rangers manages to keep losses down to an average of 1 a year. The rhino bridges the gap between two of the reserve's habitats. It frequents both the savanna and the woodland. Manas is rich in orchids. They bloom after the burn. Woodlands are essential to the gaur, the so-called Indian bison. These huge beasts, a bull stands over 6 feet at the shoulders, are really hill animals. The foothills and forests of Manas suit them perfectly, especially when the new grass is sprouting on the forest edge. Gaur are usually shy, but a bull will sometimes charge without provocation. After the monsoon, the flowering trees flame with blossom. It's then that you appreciate the richness and color of the bird life of Manas, especially the nectar feeders like the blue-throated barbet. That's a grey bulbul. And a rarity, a great Himalayan barbet. A grey-headed myna feeds on the flowers of the coral tree. A fairy bluebird next. The nearby bombax tree attracts a rose-ringed parakeet and a red-vented bulbul. That's a jungle myna. Deeper in the woodlands, the bombax blossoms attract considerably larger feeders. These are capped langurs, the northeastern race of the more common grey langur found further south. Unlike their grey relatives, they keep almost entirely to the treetops. The capped langurs are found on the Indian side of Manas, apparently because they are unable to cross the river to Bhutan, where they have a far rarer but very close relation. Like all langurs, they feed on leaves, fruits and blossoms. They don't even come down to ground level to drink at the numerous streams. Their vegetarian diet supplies them with all the moisture they need. The giant hornbills nest and roost mainly on the Indian side of the reserve. Most mornings, when the fruits are ripe on the Bhutan side, they fly across the river to feed there. It's pleasant to be able to report that there's complete cooperation between India and Bhutan at Manas. People, and this includes visitors, are as free as the birds to cross from one side of the reserve to the other. Once you're over the river into the Bhutan woodlands, a remarkable sight greets you in the treetops. The langurs here are pure gold in color. The golden langur was only discovered in 1953 by the British naturalist E.P.G. The amazing fact is that they only exist in an area 12 kilometers long between the Manas and Sankosh rivers. As far as is known, this beautiful monkey doesn't live anywhere else in the world. Like their less decorative cousins, the capped langurs, on the Indian side of the river, they hardly ever descend to the ground. They're completely arboreal, like the very large rodent which shares the treetops with them, the Malayan giant squirrel. How the golden langur escaped notice for so long in what is a fairly well-explored area is a complete mystery. The scientific world took some time to get over the shock. When it did, it named the new species Presbytis gi, in honor of its discoverer, EPG. The golden langur's treetop neighbor, the Malayan giant squirrel, is over 3 foot long from nose to tail. It's an extremely shy animal, generally silent, unlike the langurs who make an unearthly din, shrieking and barking whenever they spot anything suspicious. The fascination of Manas is its variety of species, seasonal mood and habitat. The hornbill's forays after food take them into the richest habitat of all, the dense forest. That's a wreathed hornbill. A macaque feeds close by. The orchids of the forest are even more magnificent than those of the grasslands. The forest swarms with life, strange insects and small mammals like the hoary-bellied squirrel. A blue-throated barbet pokes its head from a nest hole just like a woodpecker. The genuine article, a 3-toed golden-backed woodpecker, excavates its own nest hole nearby. The ancestor of every domestic chicken in the world, the red jungle fowl, struts in a clearing, unaware of the service its species has done mankind. Sambar are deer of the deep forest, but during the hot season they emerge to cool off in the pools left by the shrinking Manas River. Others have the same idea. Tigers feel the heat more than any other big cat. Manas has a higher density of tigers than anywhere else in the subcontinent. This female scent marks before melting away into the forest once again. She's wary. She knows there's a male around, but isn't yet receptive to him. The tiger's growls alarm a swamp partridge and her brood. There are now at least 90 tigers in the reserve. Their increase is largely due to the fact that Project Tiger, funded by the Indian government and World Wildlife Fund in 1973, provided the means to protect them. But Project Tiger did more, much more than that. It protected what is possibly the most exciting reserve in India, MANAS, a place of many endangered and rare species and many seasonal and scenic moods.
Three tiger cubs feed on a kill. A rare sight, even in the strictly protected Royal Chitwan National Park in the Kingdom of Nepal, where these cubs live. But in a year or two's time, they'll be fully grown. Then they may have to leave the safety of the park and seek their fortunes in less idyllic surroundings outside. Chuck McDougall on the right and Dave Smith are two scientists studying the tigers of Chitwan. But the methods they use are very different.
Is on the left front.
They're learning a great deal about the behavior of the tigers in the park. Their joint efforts are aimed at safeguarding the futures of cubs like these. Chitwan National Park lies just inside Nepal's southern border with India. The Nepalese government has recently extended the total area of the park to 360 square miles. Chitwan is in the Terai, the area of jungle and grassland below the Himalayan foothills. It's one of the last unspoiled wildlife areas, principally because the whole of the Chitwan Valley was once part of a royal hunting reserve. Today, the park is an isolated remnant of that once large hunting area, but it still retains much of the natural grandeur and great variety of wildlife of former times. Unlike many of the reserves in the Indian subcontinent, Chitwan has a healthy population of tigers. It's prime tiger country, containing up to 40 animals. Chuck McDougall used to hunt tigers, but for several years now he's lived in Chitwan, employing his old hunting skills to find out more about the movements and behavior of the park's tigers. He knows all the tigers in his study area at the western end of the park, and he's been able to record the life histories of many of the tigers born in the area since his work commenced. The tiger is a shy and elusive animal, and because of man's persecution, it's chiefly nocturnal. So its movements are extremely difficult to follow. This is where Chuck uses his fieldcraft. Tigers leave obvious footprints or pug marks. The shape and size of the pugs vary with each individual tiger, and also with its age and sex. To Chuck, they're as distinctive as fingerprints to a criminologist. He now has all his regular tigers on file. The width of the pad and the spacing and shape of the toes are the characteristics which he uses to identify the owner of each set of prints. By following the pug marks of known tigers, he's able to plot their movements through the forest, even without seeing the tigers themselves. But tigers leave other signs. Here, Chuck and Nepalese tracker Sakali Gurung have found a place where a tiger has scraped a bare patch with its hind feet on the forest floor, and then deposited scent there. Scrape marks are often found by the side of the regular trails which tigers use as they move through the forest.
Malabali, the western male. These tracks look about a day old. Here's a scrape mark.
A tiger has sprayed scent on a tree in the same way as a dog uses a lamppost. The scent is strong, even to a human nose, and the pungent odour may linger for several weeks. After scent marking the tree, the tiger often rears up and rubs its face on the bark. This impregnates the scent on the tree and on the tiger itself. Tigers in the park show a marked preference for scent marking the underside of leaning trees. Scientists have yet to discover why this should be.
What do you think, Buckley?
Each tiger normally occupies a large area of jungle, its exclusive territory. Scrapes and scent marking are the tiger's way of advertising its presence to other tigers in the area, and announcing that this particular stretch of forest is occupied.
Mark here. It looks like a large animal.
But some signs are less subtle and are obvious even to the untrained eye. The tiger has killed a large animal, and the flattened grass bears witness to the struggle. After feeding, the tiger has dragged the remains into thicker cover. It'll probably return later to take a second meal from the kill. It's an adult sambar stag. For the tiger to drag the stag 200 or 300 yards is no mean feat, when you consider that the stag weighs around 600 pounds, and the tiger may be half that weight. Though their investigations involve the use of different techniques, Dave, Chuck and their Nepalese trackers work closely together. They examine the tiger's kill, noting the puncture marks of the powerful canine teeth in the stag's throat. To match the prints he knew so well with their owners, Chuck needed identification photographs. So he set up a flash gun and camera on a trail regularly used by tigers. He planned to let them take their own nighttime portraits. The camera and flash units had to be carefully camouflaged. On the trail, buried beneath the sand, he positioned a pressure release plate. When an animal stepped on the plate, it would release the camera shutter and flash simultaneously and take its own photograph. The test picture was a self-portrait. The first success was a leopard, then a civet cat, and finally, the tigers. This is Mahila Bale, a male tiger Chuck has known since cubhood, caught in mid-stride in the pitch dark of the jungle at night. In the comparative safety of the park, The tigers sometimes forsake their nocturnal habits and show themselves in daylight, chiefly in the early morning and late afternoon. To watch them, Chuck uses a hide set up where a tiger has made a kill. If undisturbed, a tiger will return to its kill several times, often until every scrap of meat has been eaten. He had the night pictures of Mahila Bale. Now he had the opportunity to observe him at close quarters and in good light as he returned to take another meal from the kill. Another visitor was Bangi, the mother of the now fully grown Mahila Bale. Her name means crooked and refers to the shape of her pugs caused by the oddly spaced toes of a forefoot. She has a new litter, one of which approaches cautiously. Bangi's new litter of cubs is about 6 months old. Though they feed avidly from the kill, they're still totally dependent on their mother to find and kill their food for them. Not until they're nearly 2 years old will they be ready to fend for themselves. All the skills of hunting must be learned from their mother, and then gradually the family will break up as the cubs move away to live more solitary lives. From watching the development of several litters, Chuck found a distinct pattern emerging. As the cubs reach independence, they move away from the area of their birth. Sometimes Chuck sees these newly independent tigers in other parts of the park, but several have disappeared from his study area entirely. He began to think that many of the young tigers left the park, perhaps for good. When everybody's had enough to eat, it's time to move off for a good sleep to digest the meal. 2 of the cubs amble down to the stream to take a drink on the way. The tigress is much more cautious, perhaps because she has young cubs with her. But in Chuck's experience, Bangi is a particularly shy tigress anyway, and one seldom seen in daylight. Another family travel along the same route taken by the tigers. The smooth otters are not convinced that the coast is clear, and the cubs stay close to their parents. Their caution is justified. One of the tiger cubs has stayed behind at the kill site, perhaps to taste a brief moment of early independence from the rest of the family. Though the cub probably wouldn't give them a second glance, the otters are not keen to meet any tiger. But after another reconnaissance, the parents decide it's safe to continue their journey along the stream. Not all the tigers which Chuck sees are known to him personally. This young male enjoying a cooler in the stream is not a resident in the western part of the park, but a stranger from elsewhere, perhaps just passing through. He gives Chuck a good chance to meet him at close quarters and also to see that he's wearing a collar. How and why he got the collar, we'll find out in a minute. Dawn in Royal Chitwan National Park. As the sun climbs above the trees, the valley is bathed in mist and at its most beautiful. Through the mist looms an elephant, striding ghost-like through the chilly fog of early morning. On her back, the elephant carries 3 men out looking for tigers.
Let's circle around to the left.
Dave Smith from the University of Minnesota is working for the Tiger Ecology Project in Nepal. His speciality, radio tracking the tigers of Chitwan to follow their movements both in and outside the park. You have to be up early to follow tigers, in this case a tiger already fitted with a radio collar. This gives out a signal picked up by the aerial carried aboard the elephant.
This is about the same location we got on late yesterday.
There's always something to be seen from elephant back. It's like watching from a moving hide. A pack of wild dogs or dolis play on an open forest track. They don't realize that the elephant is carrying that potential enemy, man, on her back. The elephant is unworried by the dogs. They're fierce and ruthless hunters of smaller game. Even the lordly tiger holds them in respect. Sadly, they seem to be getting rarer and are only occasionally seen within the boundaries of the park. As the forest warms up, the tiger will seek out a shady patch of dense cover in which to rest during the heat of the day. But the signal from the collar it's wearing betrays the tiger's resting place. Dave climbs a tree in order to get a bearing on the tiger's exact position. For the elephants, it's a chance to take a few mouthfuls of well-earned breakfast. And elephants make willing stepladders. Those pug marks tell Dave and chief tracker Prem Bahadur Rai that the tiger has passed this way.
Eastern limit of 107's territory.
The tracks are fresh and the imprint of each toe shows clearly. The tiger was evidently moving along this riverbed while Dave and Prem were receiving its signals from the back of the elephant.
This 107 is just a little bit ahead of us.
Even though they rely largely on radio tracking, pug marks are still important and tell Dave and Prem much about the movements of individual tigers. Prem's expertise in tracking tigers on the ground stems from the days when he was a Royal Nepalese shikari, or hunter. By following and plotting the movements of tigers over several years, the Tiger Ecology Project has found that the female tigers each have a clearly defined territory, up to 10 square miles in extent, where other tigresses are usually unwelcome. The area of forest used by several tigresses is also shared by a resident adult male tiger. His territory, up to 40 square miles in size, includes those of one or more tigresses whose cubs he will father. It became clear why some of the younger tigers had to move away from the park to find vacant territories in which to live. To follow the movements of the tigers, Dave fits them with radio collars. But before you can do that, you must first catch your tiger, using an anesthetic dart fired at close range. The tiger he's after is wearing a radio collar which has ceased to work. Now it needs to be replaced. For the moment, scientist must turn hunter. Dave selects a suitable tree from which he hopes to dart the tiger when Prem and his team of beaters drive it within range. The elephant departs, leaving Dave to find a comfortable position for his weight and from which he can watch the place where he expects the tiger to break from cover. Meanwhile, Prem and his helpers lay out a white cloth barrier right around the area in which the tiger is lying up. It's an old method developed in Nepal and used in the great tiger hunts of the past. Now it's playing its part in helping to conserve tigers. It's called a beat cloth, and its purpose is to prevent the tiger escaping into another part of the forest. Carefully laid, this simple white cloth is quite sufficient to prevent the tiger breaking away when the beaters drive it out. When everything is ready, the beaters drive the tigress in the desired direction. Disturbed by the noise of the beaters, she quietly leaves her resting place to find another, more secluded one. Dave knows that he almost certainly has only one chance of a good shot at the tiger. The dart went home in the shoulder. Now it's important to keep her in view from elephant back until the drug starts to take effect. Within 2 minutes, the drug is beginning to work, and the tigress starts to meander as she moves through the forest. Finally, she lies down. A cautious approach on foot to make sure the drug has taken effect.
All right, let's move her in the shade and get some more water.
The animal is doused with water to ensure that she doesn't become overheated while under the drug's influence. Now the old collar can be removed. The tigress's neck fur hasn't suffered through wearing it.
God, not a mark on the fur after 2 years. That's not bad. Yeah, she's in good shape.
She's large for her sex, weighing in at 340 pounds. A new collar is fitted in place of the old one. Each collar has a life of 2 years and is designed to fall off after that time if the wearer hasn't been redarted.
All right, let's get chest girth next. We want to measure chest girth, total length.
Measurements are taken and the overall condition of the tigress noted in detail.
Temperature's still good.
Her temperature is recorded to check that she shows no adverse reaction to the drug. The new collar is tested and an antidote given. All that remains is to see that her recovery is normal. After recovery, tigers frequently return to their last kill for another meal, a sign that they're not unduly disturbed by the experience. Following the movements of tigers over large areas proved impossible from elephant back. United Nations Development Project offered the use of a light aircraft from which collared tigers could be tracked outside the park. These are the animals which can't find territories inside the park and are therefore compelled to move away from the safety it offers them. Tracking from an aircraft gives a clear idea of the routes taken by the younger tigers as they move outside the park. It's vital that the forests which still exist along the park's borders are kept intact to provide buffer areas for Chitawana's excess tigers and to act as corridors along which they can travel successfully into other reserves. Chuck McDougall, Dave Smith and the Nepalese wildlife authorities are all working towards a better understanding of how tigers live. This has enabled the Nepalese government to preserve these forest areas and thereby safeguard the future of Chitwan's tigers. When Bangi's cubs grow up, it's highly likely that they will be forced to look for territories outside the park. Thanks to research and the strong Nepalese stand on conservation, they've now got a far better chance of surviving.